Okay, this is assignment 8. There are 4 questions. So first thing I want you guys to do is to, if you pause the video, go get the assignment, have it in front of you, and read question number 1. Basically, you have about 38,500,000 you want to invest, and they tell you invest them in 5 different options. So we can, these your options, we can, you make them your variables. So you say, let me just adjust this question. Let A be amount invested in the first one, and the first one is Acadia growth. W amount invested in Western technology. D in Davis International. C in Canadian bonds, and U in US bonds. Each one of these investments gives you a certain return, and at the end of the question they want you to maximize return. So you're maximizing return, and the return for this is, for the first one, is 5%, so 0.059 of whatever invested in A. The second one is 0.098, whatever invested in W. 0.074 of whatever invested in D. And 0.035 of whatever invested in C. And 0.045 of whatever invested in U. And then, as you know, you have to do the subject to the constraints for the system. And to make it easy, they gave you all the constraints in point form. And there's also the first one, the 38 million. I'm gonna call this investment. So whatever you put in A, W, D, C, U must not go over your investment of 38 million. That's the first constraint. Now in point form, we read number 2. You have to have at most 30% of the funds should be in Acadia. So what's invested in A should be at most 30% of the total investment. And the total investment, a lot of people think it's the 38 million. No, this is your investment, is whatever you put in all of them. So now if you read this, what's invested in Acadia at most, so less than or equal 30% of the entire investment. Second one, at least 20% in bonds. Bonds, that's Canadian and US. So the Canadian and US, C and U, what's invested in them must be at least 20% of the entire fund. No more than 45 should be invested in Western and Davis, W and D. So W and D, what's invested in them, no more than 45 of the total investment. And for every dollar invested in Acadia, there should be at most $2 invested in technology. We went over this in one of the assignments. This is called the reverse statement. I don't know if you guys remember. So for this dollar invested, they tell you for every dollar invested in Acadia, at most 2 invested in Western. So you have A at most and W. So what's invested in Acadia, at most invested, and so you put them in the same order. Acadia first, then Western, and at most. But the dollar value you switch. It's $1 Acadia, 2 Western, you flip, you make it 2 and 1 here. You don't have to write the 1. You bring it over, so 2A minus W less than or equal 0. There is also one more constraint, so I'm just gonna erase this to allow some space. Return on bonds and international must be at least 6%. So the return on bonds and international. Bonds would be CU and international D, so D, C, and U. The return on them, return for D, C, and U, we know from the table, it's 0.74 return for the D, it's 0.35 return for the C, and it's a 0.045 return for the U. This should be at least 6% of the entire return. And the entire return would be 5.9 of A, 9.8 of W, 7.4 of D, 3.5 of C, 4.5 of U, and at the end of any question, all variables greater than or equal 0. So this is for the first question. Now we go to question 2. So I want you to read it first. Question 2, they tell you that you have this top line furniture store, they open 24 hours. They also tell you something that any staff member must complete 8 hours, so keep this in mind, they must complete 8 hours. But they give you different shifts. The first one starts 11 a.m., ends at 3 p.m. And you have the 3 p.m., 7 p.m. So each shift is only 4 hours. You have 7 p.m. till 11 p.m. Then 11 p.m. till 3 a.m. You have 3 a.m. till 7 a.m. and then 7 a.m. till 11 a.m. And that would be the complete. Minimum required. They tell you in shift number 1, they need to have at least 8 people. Shift 2, they need 12. Shift 3, they need 12. Then 10, 11, 15. If someone works in between 11 p.m. and 7 a.m., 11 to 7, here or here, they're gonna get $25 an hour. But if they work between 7 and 11, they only get 17. As you know, we always start, this is called staffing. And it's a major question, usually it's part of the final exam. And the way we define the variables, we do it this way. Let x1 be number of staff, and you have to use this word, starting when the first shift starts. So x1 would be number of staff starting 11 a.m. x2, people starting 3 p.m. x3, starting 7 p.m. x4, starting 11 p.m. x5, starting 3 a.m. and x6 would be starting 7 a.m. So this is how you define the variables. You say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and each one of them would be number of staff starting, whatever the time of the start for each shift. You're trying to, according to the question, you're trying to minimize the cost. So I'm just going to allow space here. You know how it works. Okay. So if you're minimizing cost, this group here, they will get $17 an hour. The group here will also get $17 an hour. Group here will also get $17 an hour. But the next two groups, this one will get 25, this one will get 25, and the last one will get 17. Now, the subject to here where it's a little bit interesting. When you do the subject to, you ask yourself this. Who's working in the shift? So just watch this part to see if you can understand it. You have the X1 group, they start 11 a.m. They do 4 hours. They have to complete 8 hours, so they come again for shift 2 to do the second 4 hours, so that would be 8 hours. Then here you have X2, they start, they do 4 hours, and the same group will come here to finish the 8. You have the X3 people, they start 7 p.m. They do 4 hours, and here they finish. Then you have this group starting here, they finish here. X5, they start at 3 a.m., they finish here. And finally, X6 starts here and finishes here. So the way we do the subject to for this question, we said shift number 1. We have the X1 and the X6, they need at least 8. Shift 2. We have 1 and 2, they need at least 12. We have 2 and 3, they need at least 12. Shift 4, we have 3 and 4, they need at least 10. For the next one, shift 5, they need 4 and 5, at least 11. 5 and 6, at least 15. All variables are, there are two things here. For only this question, you have to say they must be integers and greater than or equal 0. Integers because you have to have only whole numbers for this problem. It's a number of people. You can't have 6.5 people working or 7.2 people working. It must be a good number. So to indicate only for the staffing question, you say they all must be integers and greater than or equal 0. So these are the first two questions. This would be part 1. Part 2 would be the last two questions. Okay.